Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sprites of Life podcast. I'm Chris,
I'm Don. There's no Lucas.
and I'm doing my best Lucas impression because Lucas couldn't make it tonight because Mother Nature decided he shouldn't have power at his house.
That's not a good enough excuse.
You can make it work. You've recorded on your phone before. Lucas has no excuse.
I know, and I'm here with a recently bitten thumb, so
You could say you were snake bit.
that would be incredibly accurate. I was not paying attention enough while feeding a ball python that I found in a bush in a neighbor's yard, and she got me pretty good and latched on. It's been about 10 minutes. Got her under some running water though, and got her to let go.
How long have you had the ball python?
Several years now. Her name is Honey Bun. I've had her. Now that I think about it, I've had her for at least like 4 years now, probably.
Dang, okay, okay.
Yeah, she's big. So just being wild caught, she's a pretty aggressive feeding response. I think she was eating live food, or like her previous owners were feeding her live before they abandoned her. Don't abandon your pets, especially in Florida, especially when they're pythons, even if they're little ones. But she's good. It's just when she's in the tank, she's like, and I've been using a feeding dish, which has helped with the feeding response. Dead food only and all that. But she got me good today. Didn't let go for a little while. But it's all good. She's back in her tank. She ate her rat. She seems very pleased with herself.
How one should be after eating a healthy meal.
Yeah.
Well, Don, I figured we could probably lean on your expertise for this upcoming episode because I don't think there's anybody I know who plays more RuneScape than you.
Okay, so this baffles me, honestly. So yeah, so we're talking about RuneScape. So shout out to anyone that's properly nostalgic. I don't know how you or Lucas didn't play. I feel like everyone in my like elementary school and middle school played RuneScape back in the day.
I had never even heard of it until I met you. But before we get into that, Don, so we've got a little bit of news to cover. So first, I guess we will do the we can call it show news instead of science news. But Lucas and I will be making an appearance at GalaxyCon in Raleigh. We have two presentations one on Friday afternoon and the other Saturday evening. I believe we're doing the Pokemon of Paldea and Would You Survive in the Pokemon World? The answer, as it may surprise you, is likely no.
That is a great panel. I've been part of that panel. I've seen that panel. I'm really sad I can't make it to this one, but it's going to be great. I would highly recommend anyone in that area that's going to the con, especially definitely check it out.
That's going to be a good fun time. Lucas is going to come be up here for the weekend and we'll have some fun. So if you are able to make it, then please, come on out. It'll be a good time had by everybody. But in gaming news, we're going to talk a little bit. It's a little bit of video game Dawn, but it's a crossover. How much Magic the Gathering do you play?
None ever.
None ever.
I
Okay.
know I have a couple good friends that play competitive VGC that are from Magic originally or also play Magic, so I have a very minor knowledge of the game. I know there was a Lord of the Ring expansion a while ago, and I thought that was neat.
I really love the Lord of the Rings expansion.
And I know yeah, most of the stuff I learned about Magic outside of them was from that one South Park episode.
There's a new expansion. Now, granted, I am not overly familiar with all of the what Magic calls a lot of their things, but there is. I will call it an expansion. They just launched a Assassin's Creed expansion.
Oh, that's actually really oh, that's very cool.
They put that out. I've actually been trying to like grab a couple of them because I love Assassin's Creed unabashedly. I mean, it's a really cool set. They've got they kind of got me with the Lord of the Rings set, so I've been keeping an eye on it, but they've got the like Universes Beyond line that they've been messing around with. And that's what the Lord of the Rings was. They did a Doctor Who set, they did a Fallout set. I know some people who like Magic are not the most happy that they seem to be releasing like 13 plus sets a year. And it's a little hard and a little pricey to keep up with, to say the least. The Assassin's Creed one, I mean, it's got I think all the assassins make a card appearance. So like
That's what I was gonna ask what the era of Assassin's Creed was like, but I like that it's got a little bit of everything.
I bought a Beyond booster the other day and got like a Javi the Allfather. I think Javi and Altair are my favorite assassins, so that made me pretty happy.
Oh
But
yeah,
I think
I'm an Ezio fan.
Ezio, yeah, it's I mean, that's kinda hard to dispute.
Him and, was it it's is Connor Black Flag?
No, Connor is
That's the American one,
3.
right?
That's
Yeah,
3.
yeah.
Edward Kenway.
That's the guy. Yeah, so, I'm a big fan of him, but also that's just because I really like p being a pirate.
You just like being a pirate?
I just
Honestly, the naval aspect of that game is really, really hard to top. Like, I don't think there's very many games that,
there's honestly,
di
even dedicated, like, pirates, like, naval games, I feel like struggled to sort of capture Black Flag, had, like, just the right amount of I don't know, the sea shanties, you can go whaling with the boys.
so whenever there's the sailing game, I always have flashbacks to the original release of Zelda Wind Waker,
Oh, yeah.
and, like, how kind of boring the sailing got in that game. Like, it was cool at first, and then especially when you were hunting down the shards of the Triforce, it became so tedious.
The Triforce quest in that game is like I Wind Waker is maybe my favorite Zelda, but the Triforce quest in that game is absolutely brutal.
So, like, the fact that Black Flag is able to have the sailing aspect of things and, like, keep it engaging and fun the whole way through, I think is a feat unto itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Assassin's Creed expansion is out. I think it's pretty cool. I like it's got me buying magic cards because I like the Lord of the Rings one. I like the magic one. Not like I needed an excuse to buy any more shiny cardboard, but here we are. But we're keeping it pretty light today in the news done, and I think we will just dive into our overall topic. Now, as I said, I know next to nothing about RuneScape. So, can you please educate me a little bit about the game and then we'll jump into the critters?
Yeah, so this I guess I'll start from the beginning. A little bit of history. Hopefully some people will recognize this. I thought maybe it's just from my I just have a particular nostalgia for this game and I do still play it. So RuneScape's an MMORPG. It actually started back in 2001 by the Gowers brothers. And like now that's known as RuneScape Classic, and it was sort like graphically a little different. It was almost like 2D on a 3D sort of background. Mechanically, it was kind of janky, but it was like, and it encompassed like a much smaller area, obviously, than it would now because it's a 23-year-old game. If you want, basically now called RS Classic. And then in 2004, it got a pretty major graphical overhaul to the point where now it's and it's was what was called RuneScape 2 or RS2 people called it. And like that overhaul and it had some changes to the engine and combat system, like primarily so in the first RuneScape every weapon had the same attack speed. So like a great big giant like a two-handed sword. In the original RuneScape the strongest tier of metal was Runite or rune. And also you cast magic spells with runes. So there's lots of runes involved in the game. But like Runite ore was the strongest ore and the strongest metal. So like if you had a two-handed rune sword, two-handed rune like a rune two-handed sword would be like equally as fast as like a dagger. So that was just the best weapon. And then RuneScape 2, which is I think at least for my personal demographic or at least like my friends growing up in like middle school and elementary school, which I'm dating myself here, came out in 2004 and that was the one that we were all playing. It was like a very like low polygon sort of art style. Point and click medieval adventure game. And it added some pretty big changes to the combat system where like weapon speed varied depending on like what weapon you were using or the attack style. And then there were three different attack styles for melee. There was melee, magic, and ranged attacking. Good old combat triangle, much like Fire Emblem. For those more familiar with that, same sort of rules applied, but it sort of added attack speed. So things like daggers were now faster than like two-handed weapons. So your DPS varied depending on what you picked for your weapon setup.
I'm going to be honest, Don. I was not expecting you to tell me that this game predated World of Warcraft by 3 years.
RuneScape's old, man, and it's held together by paper clips and like string in some of the coding. Some of the earliest quests in the game are like ancient. Like there's so when RuneScape 2 happened, things carried over from RuneScape 1 in terms of I believe like equipment and levels. So there's accounts right now that have been basically active since 2001.
That's sick. I love that. And it's all held together with dreams and duct tape.
Yeah, the original RuneScape was pretty much just I think it was just two brothers kind of doing stuff. So like the very earliest quests and I will say I'm gonna be shilling hard for RuneScape in this episode. I'm sorry. I'm a fan. I'm a fanboy.
We're not sponsored by RuneScape.
We are not. RuneScape, give me free stuff. But anyway, like I'm trying to think of a way to describe. In a lot of, I guess, in a lot of MMOs, most quests are like go here and kill 10 things or something along those lines.
Yeah,
And RuneScape's quests are very. It's the half of the quests, especially the earlier ones. It's the RuneScape's originally based out of Britain. The company's Jagex now that owns it, and the quests have a very tongue-in-cheek humor. Like the writing in the game is very funny. Like there's a lot of very funny jokes and stuff's kind of silly. And your player character, like you're the protagonist of the game, but your guy's kind of just an idiot. Like one of the earliest quests, you go to this place to like go to this temple, and there's this monster dog, and you're like obviously like, and a guy tells you to kill the dog, and then you go back to the king to tell you that you killed the monster dog, and the king's like, that dog was the guardian that kept the vampires from crossing the river, and your guy's like, oh my bad. It's like the player character in RuneScape is kind of just a lovable idiot, and I really like that fact that they're not like the chosen one.
yeah.
They're just a dumb guy. But anyway, sorry, continue with the history. So, yeah, so during the mid to late 2000s into the 20 teens, there was steadily some changes in RuneScape primarily, where they started changing the combat system more, making it more like sort of the more they sort of started making it more and more trying to in line with World of Warcraft, where previously the combat system was see enemy, click on enemy, and then you hit the guy and then he hits you or vice versa or whatever. And there were things that made it more complex, but it was basically that. And they started adding like a hot bar with abilities, graphically overhauled, sort of looked more in line with how World of Warcraft looked at the time. And as well as some other changes involving microtransactions and things like that that started to alienate a portion of the more original player base.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
But in sort of a crazy departure from how a lot of games go, so RuneScape, it's like a lot of MMOs. It's a subscription based model. So a lot of the players followed through on their threat to leave and they left. And Jagex, to their credit, someone found basically just stored on like a hard drive somewhere a build of the game from August 2007, which was what a lot of people considered that area to be peak RuneScape. And then they started in 2013. The game sort of split into RuneScape 3, which was sort of fully more modern MMO style, and old school RuneScape, which was a build based off the 2007 model of the game in terms of graphics, mechanics, things like that. And now at this point, old school RuneScape is the more popular version of the game. They've added a ton of new content, some things referencing RuneScape 3 with expanded lore, some things entirely new. The mechanics, while like seeming very simple, are like can be very complex in regards to like spacing with boss fights. There's raids, there's things like that. There's prayer mechanics, and the game is just as you would expect from a game that's 23 years old, just a tremendous amount of content like within the game. But yeah, sorry, kind of moving on with it. It's like RuneScape takes place in the world of Gielinor, and as again, it's a gigantic game. It has pretty much every biome imaginable. It's home to all your standard fantasy races. I don't think there's orcs though. Actually, there's ogres, trolls, dwarves, multiple types of dwarves, elves, people, humans, vampires, all that good stuff. And then a few unique races. One of my favorite ones is the Tsar, which are they live in like these volcano areas, and they're basically made of rock, and as they age they cool. So the oldest Tsar are basically just rocks, and then they kind of shatter, and then that's their money. They use their elders as money.
I can dig it.
And then so many of the creatures from and monsters from the area, they sort of just borrow from either actual animals or they just are actual animals. And then there's a lot of like your standard fantasy creatures.
So Don, with all that background in mind, tell me what are the critters that populate this world?
All right, so I mean, I think I had a link I could send you just to show you the list, but it's kind of absurd.
Okay.
I will say I apologize to any RuneScape 3 fans. I'm not like a RuneScape 3 hater, but we're primarily focusing on old school RuneScape just because that's what I'm much more familiar with, and it does have right now the higher player count.
This still just blows my mind about all the different like that both versions of the game are just still populated and thriving. That's so cool.
All right, so I just sent you a link in the Discord to the bestiary
Okay.
of yeah. So RuneScape has a variety. I guess I should explain a little bit more mechanically of the game. So like any MMO, RuneScape has a variety of skills, but I guess in regards to most of the monsters, we talk about primarily the combat stats. There's attack, which is I guess an equivalent would be dexterity, like how
Mhm.
often, and then strength, which is how big the number is. There's your hit points. There's your ranged attacking stat, which covers bows, crossbows, etc., and then your magic attacking stat. And then there's a bunch of other stats. There's agility, cooking, fire making, fishing, hunter, crafting, all basically everything like that. But I just sent you that. And like
Mhm.
and your own levels from 1 to 99 determine your personal combat level, and then every monster in the game has a combat level as well. From anything like level 1, which is like a duck in a park, to like exceeding level 400. It's like maybe something like
Alchemical Hydra.
exactly the alchemical hydra, which is a like end game boss basically that's level 426 and attacks with like all sorts of things. It's like a crazy boss worth tons of money. I think the highest level boss is from the newest expansion, which I will touch on a little bit later, level 1500. The player's max level is 126.
Wait, so you're fighting something that's like 10, 10 times higher levels than
Yeah,
you?
like I said, the game has a lot of, for being as simple as it looks, and how a lot of the game is just click on thing, take turns hitting each other, eat food, or take potion when almost dying. The highest level of the game has very complex mechanics. RuneScape works off a tick system, which is basically the game registers an action every 0.6 seconds. So, and there's a thing called there's prayers within the game as a skill, and there's prayers on the fly within 0.6 seconds to adapt to different attacks, and like knowing your spacing because bosses have special attacks and things like that. It really does get very complex for as simple as it looks. But I guess we'll just jump into the creatures. I was kind of hoping, honestly, Lucas would have liked this first one, honestly. But first one is just an actual animal, and that's the Quetzel or Quetzel. Are you familiar with them at all?
Neither the real bird or the RuneScape one, but I can assume some kind of appearance based off of what I'm guessing is a similarity to Mesoamerican influences.
So the Quetzal is it's a group of birds actually. It's a family of birds from Central America primarily. They do occasionally trend all the way into the southern US and into the northern South America. Their name comes from a native word, Quetzali, which I probably mispronounced, which means large, brilliant tail feather. And as you can see from the pictures, they have very long tail feathers, particularly the males. Quetzals get about like 14 to 16 inches, but their tails can exceed 30 inches. They're the national bird of Guatemala. But within RuneScape, they're native to the continent of Varlamore, which is a relatively new area they added this year to the game. And it borrows heavily on designs from like Central America. There's a lot of like sort of like Mayan architecture and Aztec architecture. And within that area, there's the Quetzal transport system. And within the game, the Quetzals are large enough to basically you get a whistle that you can use to call your Quetzal. You get a personal one named Renu, and you can pet him because he's a good boy.
Can you dress them up and make them look nice?
You can change what color he is because there's a variety of species of Quetzals and their appearance. Like there's you can change his color within the game to reflect the various species. He initially resembles, as sort of the main design is the resplendent Quetzal, which is the largest species and the national bird of Guatemala, which is I said it has like I think the longest recorded tail streamers was 39 inches, which is kind of nuts for a bird that's half that size. And I mean, if you've seen some of the pictures, they really are a beautiful bird. They're
It's like, so how many different how many, like, you posted the green and red kind of one. How many like different colors can they possibly be? Are they
so
all kind
there
of
are
more like
ones that are primarily yellow. There are some that are red. There's some that are almost entirely green. There's some that are more blue. And they're heavy, very heavy on the sexual dimorphism, which means the males and females look differently. Most female Quetzals are much darker coloring, typically more towards brown, as you would see a lot because if you're in an area like the rainforest with a lot of predators and things like that, and you're very brightly colored and not blending in, and you make it to, breeding age while being like that, it's a clear sign of, genetic fitness to the females. So it's very much just the male signaling
Efficient at surviving.
that they're good at surviving, yeah, and they're, have strong genes. Yeah, and Quetzals, like in the wild, primarily they're eating, fruits, berries, insects, small vertebrates. They're very, just your classic omnivore. And they're under a little bit of threat, so they prefer like high altitude humid forests, like cloud forests,
Yeah.
which are a little bit under threat throughout their range, and they're reliant on like holes in dead standing trees, which is another sort of cause for concern a little bit. Like standing dead timber can be easily harvested and things like that. Habitat loss is a concern for them, and because of their preference for the cloud forests, they're naturally sort of fragmented to various high altitude areas. And like Quetzals, I said, they've been a national symbol. They feature heavily in several different Central American cultures' lore. And they found Quetzal feathers like in like were considered very valuable given like their length and their shininess. So things like that, they were used as trade goods, and they were sort of a luxury, high status good. They were seen in like headdresses of emperors and things like that within the Maya as well.
Are there iterations of this bird that you fight?
Oh no, so the only Quetzals within there's the one you are given once you come to Varlamore and do some quests, and then can use him to go around and to go to the different areas within the Quetzal transport network. You have to build new nests and add some feed there so that your Quetzal has a nice little spot to hang out. And do have the option to pet your Quetzal whenever you go to one of the nests. But you have a whistle, so you can call them to pick you up, but you can only go to the predetermined areas. There's several other in-game Quetzals that other NPCs own, as well as there's the Quetzal Pet, which is like a smaller version that's more in line with the size of an actual Quetzal. And he's sort of just in RuneScape, you can get pets for different things, primarily either from certain skills or from defeating certain bosses. RuneScape's a very, very grindy game. The average drop rate for pets is like often well over like 1 in 1,000. And there is a Quetzal. I think it's the Quetzin. It's like a little guy, and you get him for doing tasks for the Hunters Guild, which is in the new area. So it sort of ties together. And I've been trying to get him for a while. But the Quetzals are big enough to pick up the player character and carry him around.
Mhm.
So they're a lot bigger than a actual Quetzal. Like I said, I would say they're probably at least 10 feet tall.
Interesting. Okay, I can dig it. I can dig it. So, and then what who is your buddy?
So the Quetzal you're given once you so you have to fulfill a few quests to get to the new continent and just sort of like meet the ruling people there. And then as a reward for that, you're given your own pet Quetzal named Renu. And they're just a guy. They hang out. You can call them with your Quetzal whistle to fly back to any Quetzal nests you've already built. And you also, if you go to the Quetzal nest area, you can pet them, which doesn't do anything other than just, tell them that they're good. And because like the new area is heavy on some new animals and like added the new Hunters Guild, the Quetzal missile or Quetzal, not missile, Quetzal whistle works off charges, and you recharge it by giving raw meat to this guy, and then he charges it. But I guess we'll jump on to the next critter, which is based off not directly a real critter, but still a thing. Another guy I like a lot, and that's the Herbiboar.
Mhm. The Herbie Boar?
Herbiboar, however you want to say it.
Herbiboar.
Yeah, I dropped a picture in the Discord so you can see what I'm talking about. So the Herbiboar is native to an area in the game called Fossil Island, which is a sort of small island off the coast of sort of like the main initial continent of the game. Like if you've ever played RuneScape, people are familiar, especially like back in the day. Like when I was a kid, I was not paying for the membership, and the free to play version includes some areas like Varrock, and this is sort of off the coast of Varrock. If anyone's familiar with the game, they'll know what I'm talking about. And Fossil Island sort of it has a lot of fossils which you can find and redeem for things, as well as having, sort of a more prehistoric aesthetic. There's giant mushrooms, things like that. And the herbivore lives there. It's interacted with the hunter and the herblore skill, which is based around making potions and things like that. It's a like a pig looking animal, as the name would suggest, that has herbs that grow on its back. And it's sort of a little mini game where you sort of track it. So you'll find an area where like a mushroom's been bitten, and then tracks will lead to like a hole, or like something like that, and you'll follow that a few times, and you'll reach its burrow, and it'll come out. You'll use a pair of basically trimmers to trim the herbs off its back, and then it will run away.
So it won't attack you?
No, it's again, it's this is sort of just the mechanical, it's just like a way to train your hunter and your herb lore skills. So a large aspect of the game outside of combat is training your various skills. The 99s are sort of it's a very, very long grind. Herbiboar also is it's sort of a sought after training method because it does have pretty good experience and you have a chance to get a pet, your very own pet herbivore, which I believe is a 1 in 6,000 chance, 6,500 chance. Yeah, which is hard to do. And it's a
To say the least.
relatively high level task already. But anyway, so the herbivore is based off primarily the African bush pig, which is a sort of a central and southern African, kind of similar to a warthog. They're more forest dwelling and they don't have quite as broad of a build. Now, the herbivore is definitely smaller than the bush pig. Bush pigs can reach about 300 pounds. The herbivore is about the height of the character's like knee or waist, maybe. It's kind of hard to tell.
Herbiboar. I just can't get over it. That thing's actually like kind of cute.
He is, and the pet version's actually more fearsome looking than the normal version. His name is Herbie, and also like so everything in RuneScape has an examinable text.
Yeah.
And if you examine the herbivore, it says a hedgehog by any other name because it's got a hedge on its back and it's a hog, and it's also referencing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything in RuneScape has a very cheeky examine text. Again, it's sort of a fun. It's just like part of the game's charm, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can dig it.
But so like getting a little bit more into Herbiboar, sort of in real life references, I don't think there's any pigs that have plants that grow on their back to any amount. But I think we've talked about this before on this channel that sloths have algae that will grow in their fur.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Uh, talk to me again. Enlighten me a little bit more on it.
Right. So sloths, don't move a lot. They're often in the trees, and algae will grow on their fur, given that's a human environment. And there's a species of moth that lives exclusively within the sloth's fur that feeds on the algae. And when sloths climb down the trees once a week to poop, the moths will then go lay their eggs on their dung. And for some recent studies have shown that the sloths will actually, the more algae or the more moths they have, the more algae they will also have, and the higher nitrogen content it will have. And sloths will actually scrape the algae from their fur and feed on it when they need to. So it's sort of a symbiotic relationship between them and the moths.
Like a snack on the road.
Right. So my theory here is because the herbivore, which has various, herbs within the game that are used, you can make potions that, raise your defense or give you more run energy or make you better at fishing or give you higher attack stats, all sorts of things like that, make you restore your prayer points, grow on its back. But the herbivore seems to primarily live in burrows. At least whenever you find it in the game, it comes out of the burrow. So it makes me think that there's a similar symbiotic relationship with the herbivore, that it's coming out into the sunlight primarily to let the herbs get sun and nourishment, things like that, and it's benefiting either from camouflage or that it feeds on the herbs itself, because it would seem like that they regrow because there's a within the game when your character harvests the herbivore, you see the leaves leave its back, but you see green patches there still, which it would indicate that it's actively taking steps to cultivate those herbs on its back. So it's clearly benefiting. So I think it might be similar to a sloth where they can be emergency food. I'll say, given that like it seems like it's mainly nocturnal because when you're tracking it in game, like it's you're only finding things that it's already done. You never see it until you kick a burrow and it comes out.
I was gonna add. It also might be a roundabout defense mechanism because it is providing food for things so that other things won't kill it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point. Similar to what we see with things like crabs will give up a leg or an octopus will give up a tentacle or lizards will lose a tail.
Yeah. It's like, here, take this. Let me live.
Exactly. So I guess we'll jump into the next one, and we have the Kalphites, which I'll drop a picture in the chat. I guess they're a insect. I guess they're based off eusocial insects. They primarily live in the desert of the game. There's four variants of the Kalphites. There's the worker, the soldier, the guardian, and the queen.
So kind of a little bit of like a bee or an ant. Is that more the like ant structure or bee
Very,
structure?
I would say, yeah, they're in terms of eusocial insects, I'd say they sort of follow the ant path more.
Oh, that's a fun spiky boy.
Yeah, so the Guardian is never really an enemy you really fight, to be efficient because it's really Kalphites typically only Kalphite players really ever fight unless you're given a task for your Slayer skill, is the Kalphite Queen, who is, a boss pretty from the early days, for a while, the Kalphite Queen was the strongest enemy in RuneScape, actually, back in 2004 when she was added, and at the time, she dropped what was the best in slot, chest armor piece as well. But yeah, so the Kalphites live in a couple burrow complexes in the desert area, just south of this area called Al Kharid, which was in the free to play version as well. Several underground hives. They have a pretty, you said, standard sort of, burrowing insect social structure like ants or termites. Of the four, the workers, soldiers, the guardians, and the queen, two variants are venomous. I guess they inflict poison, but they're biting you, so they would be venomous. And that's the soldiers and the guardians, which are also aggressive towards the player character unless they're above a certain level, which the Guardians are high enough levels, they're always aggressive towards you. And then the Queen is sort of at the end, and the Queen is a multi-phase boss fight where her first half I dropped in there is a sort of a Beatles type stage. And then the second phase, she breaks out of her exoskeleton and transitions to a flying form. And there's a few interesting things about this. So we see in actual and so there's several species of ants and termites and even some bees and wasps that where the future queen or just breeding female will fly around, and once she makes her nest, she'll chew her own wings off and become sort of a sedentary animal. So this is sort of the opposite of that, where you have a later in life stage already a queen transitioning from beetle mode to wasp mode.
I'm sorry, but is there not a better way than chewing off your own wings? Like, can't you just not have wings or not use them?
I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules for the ants. Maybe you should talk to some ants, see why they do it. Maybe they just get in the way maybe they just get in the way.
Well, this is good enough. Time to eat my own body off.
Also, from a mechanical standpoint, the Kalphite, so we do see they have some level of social structure given the fact the name of their ranks, and you sort of have to get through the other ones to get to the queen, and the queen is able to sort of spawn Kalphite workers to help protect her as well. The queen also utilizes the RuneScape's prayer mechanic, where depending on her phase, she's immune to certain damage types, which I guess would imply that they're intelligent enough that the Kalphites have some form of religion
Yeah,
despite
terrifying.
being giant
Bu-
bugs.
Bug
Because
gods.
the gods in the RuneScape universe are very real, and they do like actively taking it, a goings on, look into the goings on.
So, but real quick, lore question: do you know who they worship, or is that a mystery?
Not really. So without getting too deep into the RuneScape lore, because it gets kind of wild. There's sort of three primary gods. There's sort of like a sort of good guy, but he's not. He's kind of so good that it's not good. And there's one that's like sort of like a chaos and order. There's sort of a god of balance. But then there's some elder gods, and then there's some ancient gods. It gets very complex very fast. I'll take a stab in the dark that there's some other areas within the desert part of the game that worship this ancient god called Zeros. So maybe the Kalphites subscribe to that religion, I guess.
I would probably. It's not too far of a leap, I think.
Yeah, and I guess the last other thing about this, so they borrow heavily from eusocial insects. There really aren't any eusocial insects that have venomous bites, though, that I could find. I think there's maybe one or two species of beetles that can do something like that, but not that I could find directly. One other interesting thing, and like I've mentioned before, that there's pets within the game, right? And like there's boss
Yeah,
pets.
yeah.
One of them being the Kalphite princess, which is a 1 in 3,000 drop from the Kalphite queen.
So you win the fight and then start another fight.
Sort of, well, pets within the game are untradeable, and then you get like a little form of the Kalphite queen that follows you around, either in wasp mode or non-wasp mode. And a lot of the pets have an interact option once you get them to follow you. The player can talk to the Kalphite princess, which is able to speak. And within the Kalphite lair, you find potato cactuses, which are
Mhm.
just a cactus called a potato cactus. They're used as an ingredient for certain potions in the game. And basically, in the little dialogue chain, the player asks why they like potato cactuses. Initially, the Kalphite tells you that they make a soup with it, and then it turns out they really say they do it to lure adventurers in so that they can get killed, which does indicate that the Kalphites practice a level of cultivation, which we do see in leafcutter ants, which will cut leaves, bring them below ground to grow fungi, which then they just eat. but in this case, the Kalphites gather potato cactuses to lure in adventurers. So, like a nice little reference to some actual insects that practice like a form of agriculture. And I guess moving on, sorry, trying to keep it moving.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have the terror birds, which are based off terror birds, which are already a thing. And there's two
Terror.
designs. There's two designs for terror birds. I'm going to put them both because this is the newer design, and by newer I mean it was from 2007, and then this is the original design, which is very silly.
That looks like a bird you would buy at the grocery store.
The first or the second one?
The second one.
Yeah,
That's not terrifying. Like the first, like it's not even menacing.
yeah. Well, so actual terror birds are extinct, so they're less menacing from that. But they're the family Forest Hyaday, and members of the different terror birds range from 3 to 10 feet tall. Their closest living relatives, there's two members of the genus Sirima, which is a South American bird. They're sort of a long-legged. They're similar to a secretary bird, sort of in status, and like they can reach like 80 centimeters in height, so they're pretty tall. But they're not they're sort of a a long. They look similar to secretary bird, but the largest terror bird recorded, given fossil evidence, was in Uruguay, about 770 pounds.
Okay, big boy.
And they found fossils of terror birds in Texas and Florida as well, so we know they came all the way up across. They're actually the only large known South American predator that migrated north during like the Great American Interchange, which was when the Isthmus of Panama formed, and there was sort of a mix up of northern and southern animal migration, and that was about 5 million years ago. And the terror birds were primarily they hunted on the open plains. It's like an ostrich but scarier and bigger
Yeah. Spooky.
and a lot stockier. And they pictures of their skulls. They have a very, very heavy beak and a very like a bifurcated neck vertebra towards the top. So it's so they had a very flexible neck. So the primary hunting method is that believe that they would run down their prey and then sort of use their flexible neck to get extra force and just slam their beak because they had a hook at the tip, and just sort of the downwards hammer strike gave them a very powerful like basically attack, and they would prey on like the ancestor of modern horses and things like that. Earlier area, they were basically outcompeted the mammals. Mammals stayed more to forested areas. Later on, when things got faster, they sort of lost the ability to do the burst of speed and slowly sort of got outcompeted by. And within RuneScape, they're most commonly found within the gnome stronghold, where they are ridden by gnomes as mounts for battle. Yeah, so that's and the ones within the game seem to be on the larger side. They're bigger than the player character,
So
but they're
the terror bird, honestly, Don, like looking at it, it kind of gives off like angry puffin energy.
a little bit. I'm gonna send you a picture though of a terror bird skull compared to a human skull, because I feel like just the skull alone really gives you a sense of how big the thing was.
They're like that's like two human heads.
Yeah, yeah, the larger terror bird. It's a 10-foot tall bird, but unlike being sort of skinny like an ostrich, it's an absolute tank with
Yeah.
just a gigantic, heavy, heavy beak that's like a
It,
hammer with a tip, like a war spike, and they were just
it,
running around and just slamming it into horses.
it's like having an anvil on your face.
Yeah, that's basically what they did. They would be a problem. And as far as we know, I guess there's been some more recent evidence out of Uruguay that maybe they lasted longer than we think, but it doesn't seem to be. It seems like they were extinct by the time humans reached the New World.
Yeah.
They were unrelated to things like the moa of New Zealand and things like that. That was a separate group.
I think you've got one more critter for us.
Yeah. So the last one, we're talking about Sarachnis, which is a boss enemy. It's a big spider in the game on the continent of Zaya, which is a western continent in the game. It's down in this underground temple. Sarachnis, as a boss, has multiple mechanics. One thing Sarachnis does is every few attacks, it will hiss and then fire webs at you, and then sort of stick your character in place, and then it will back off and use ranged attacks. So you have to switch your what you're praying at the time to adapt to it. There is a spider that can spit silk called the spitting spider, which sort of self-explanatory. It spits silk at its prey to trap it. It has produces silk from modified venom glands, actually.
Why spit venom when you can spit super soft silk?
Yeah, well, you stick it and then you get in there and you get him. So I just feel like this boss borrows mechanics from several actual spiders. So like there's the spitting spiders, which are a very interesting group. And then once you're entangled, though, it will back off and fire spikes at you, which at least to me, as a person that's owned some tarantulas, The urticating hairs that some tarantulas will use. If you've ever seen a video, tarantulas have hairs on their abdomen, a lot of species, and they'll flick these hairs are barbed and like stiffer than normal hairs, and they'll flick them with their back legs at a predator, and it hits your hands or your eyes like fiberglass dust. Very unfortunate. In game, it hits you a lot harder than fiberglass dust because Sarachnis is roughly like 30 feet tall, and
Yeah.
the spikes it shoots are huge. Urticating or urticate means nettle in
Mhm.
Latin, which makes a lot of sense. I've been hit in the hand before by some tarantulas, and it does feel like some fiberglass in your hands.
Have actually never interacted with a tarantula, and I am grateful for it. But that
They're
sounds
honestly great
awful.
pets.
I don't like the way you described what that just was, though.
Well,
Like, I
don't
know it's not
bother
in
it.
I know it's not intentional on their part, I just don't want it.
Well, they do it intentionally when you irritate them.
Oh, okay.
Just don't irritate them.
Just don't piss them off.
And I guess, and then, like, sort of another thing is so at 66% of its health, so I guess her health, I should say, Sarachnis is the in this underground temple where before it there's a bunch of spiders. Sarachnis will summon help, and I guess some well, I assume some of her offspring will come. One of them attacks with magic. One of them attacks with melee attacks. I don't think there's any actual magic spiders, but there are social spiders in real life, which is definitely not an animal you typically associate with social cooperation. As a whole, spiders as a group, like just as an overall, like or like just I guess genus, have evolved social behavior independently an estimated 18 times. That's across like all spiders.
Yeah, I know I'm saying for, like, the grand scope of spiders, like, that's not that
Yeah.
many.
So there's roughly 23 species that exhibit social behavior. They're primarily tropical in areas where there's like just a massive abundance of insect prey. Where like the bigger the webs you can spin, the more efficient. But a lot of them are truly but they some of them do reach all the way into the eastern US. And like depending on it sort of varies depending on the species, like the size of the colony or how much they work together. Some it's just we all share a web and we don't kill each other. But other a lot of the species that you'll see cooperative care of like offspring, like protecting of the young. They'll work together to hunt some species, despite most social spiders being on the smaller side. Some species will work together to take down like prey as large as birds. Because the longer they've found that the longer the prey struggles within the webbing, the more spiders will come to it, and they'll also work together to defend it from things like parasitic wasps and things like that to protect the eggs and each other. The largest colonizing species that I could find was Neleosmus eximus, which can have colonies exceeding 50,000 individuals.
Oh, why do you have to tell me these things, Don?
Yeah, and they'll build a big web, and then they'll build long, non-sticky webs called like not like dropper lines, basically, which are help to sort of like make flying insects fall into the web. And they found that relative to size, they don't actually per spider catch that much more prey, but their prey is much larger than the average spider catches. So they're able to work together and like larger insects and things like that will have upwards of 50 spiders will all work together to like bring them down more efficiently when they hit the web.
Interesting. I don't like it at all. I get it, I'm not supposed to like it, but they can be their own thing.
And Sarachnis has a pet version named Sriracha, which I also have never found, but I like that boss a lot. It's a one in
Like the
3,000
spicy
chance,
sauce.
like the spicy sauce. And like, also this is sort of a fun little bit of trivia. But there's a did I put a picture of Sarachnis in the chat?
I don't think you did, but I looked it up. So it's like 90% legs.
So a big part of old school RuneScape and just sort of in general is is almost like a fun tradition is the reusing of assets.
Mhm.
So unrelated to this, there's a creature in the game called a chompy bird, and I'm gonna put it in the chat so you can see. Sarachnis's body is a chompy bird, recolored red and flipped around with legs added to it.
That's just efficiency.
Exactly. Yeah. So the game, like some of especially the earlier quests, and there's modern mechanics where the devs are very vocal on Twitter and Reddit. It's very nice to have like they're very active. And people will ask about changes, and they're like, "We can't do it. This was made in 2004, and if we undo this like one thing and make this sword a slightly different color of blue, the game will explode." So it sort of adds little bit of fun to the game.
If you stare at it too hard, you see where all the duct tape is.
Yeah, and I guess on that though, I mean, I said there's a million characters in the game. I would recommend people to play it if they want to. Even the free to play version is really good. There's quite a few quests, even in the free to play, that are really fun, and it's sort of a good intro to the game. That's sort of like, yeah, I guess you could say the free trial of the game is still a pretty big game. Not some of the skills are members only, but all your combats and stuff.
Well, Don, again, thank you for enlightening me and enlightening our viewers. Everyone listening, thank you so much for lending us a little bit of your day to hear Don talk about RuneScape. I'll reiterate again, if you are in the Raleigh area for GalaxyCon on the 20th, Lucas and I will be there, so hopefully we might get to see y'all there. And if not, then I just thank y'all for continuing to listen and letting us to keep talk about this. So on that note, until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and see you later.